All right, folks, welcome back to NewsOne Now on TV1. We're, of course, breaking down some election results here. Let me go back to my Twitter feed here. First black female district judge in Farrell, Pennsylvania. Mary Odom won yesterday. Also, what took place yesterday, Mike Brown, very, very interesting. In the suburban counties in Pennsylvania, Democrats have been won places where they had not been elected in 100 years. What you're seeing is that these are places where they pretty much were okay voting. Some of these independent voters went for Donald Trump. This backlash against Trump, against his policies, you now have Republicans who are going, wait a minute, I might not want to run for re-election. Yesterday, two longtime Republicans announced in the House they're not running for re-election. We already saw Senator Jeff Flake in Arizona, Senator Bob Corker in Tennessee. If you're a Republican waking up this morning, you're saying we better pay attention, because if we are standing behind Trump, that might not bode well for my re-election.
Well, they're so focused on the, what is it, Professor, 31, 32% of Trump's
max
solid
33.
base. So they're so focused on that base that they're forgetting about growing their base. And without growing their base, people go to the polls, Roland, for a variety of reasons. You may go for a particular issue. You may go because somebody is handsome or attractive. You may go because you saw them in the grocery store. They seem like a nice person. You may go because your kids go to the same school. You also may vote for somebody because they're a decent human being. And what they're seeing with our president is the lack of decency, the lack of humanity. And they're going to the polls, whether it's in the suburbs, whether it's in the inner city, saying, this guy just isn't decent, and I want to send him a message. I didn't send the message in 2016 for whatever reason. I didn't feel like voting. I didn't like him, Secretary Clinton. You know, now I want to send him a message. So I think that's what you're seeing, whether it's in the suburbs, Roland, in the inner city, in Appalachia, in rural parts of America. People are just like, the guy's not decent. No. I want a decent president. I may not have agreed with everything with George Bush, but he was a decent man.
But the thing,
and that's where I think people are starting to vote.
But the thing, though, that we have to recognize, Greg Carr, is that, again, when you look at what's happening with health care, people all of a sudden realize, uh-oh, we see what's going on here. Also, in Rochester, New York, a sister, Mayor Lovely Warren, won her second term as mayor there. She took 60% of the vote there, and so another black mayor stays in office in Rochester, New York. Go ahead.
Frederick Douglass territory. But what you said about health care is so important. And what have we seen since they opened up the Affordable Care Act re-registration, right?
Record.
They cut 90% of the advertising, and we have, as you said, Mike, a record number of people have signed up. As you said, Roland, in Maine, they overran Republican opposition once they put it on the ballot, and the referendum said we're going to expand Medicare. So what are we saying here? We're saying that people will vote their interests once you get beyond the headline flashy stuff. And what you're documenting now in hamlet by hamlet, including all those suburbs, Duquesne, suburb of Pittsburgh, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, suburb of Philly, you're seeing places where that can easily be flipped. Rep. Bass didn't get a chance to mention it, but you've got a half dozen seats in congressional seats in districts that Hillary Clinton won in the election last year that are now held by Republicans. You may see a wave of retirements because finally the Republican National Committee, the Republican Party, separate from Trump, does not have an agenda that appeals to people's human needs. And so if they don't rush this tax cut through now, if they don't eviscerate Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act now, this may be their last chance because their coalition is fracturing as we speak.
Tax reform also is a big part. You're seeing what's going to happen as well. Republicans are now saying, look, you got to get this done. They're not under the gun. To have the House, to have the Senate, to have the White House, and pass no major legislation in the first year, that's huge. And now all of a sudden, you might tick off your base. Now all of a sudden, if you have Republicans who decide to run against incumbent Republicans, that throws their races into disarray. That opens up another opportunity again for Democratic Party.
Well, what they would rather do, they'd rather pass bad bills just so they can go back home and say, we passed something, rather than passing something that's good for their constituents. That's how jacked up their party is now relative to leadership, what issues people care about, because most of these Trump voters are on Obamacare. They don't want their health care taken away.
No. They're not on Obamacare. They're on the Affordable Care Act.
Right. Sorry.
They hate Obamacare, as Roland always said.
Exactly.
They hate Obama.
So they'll go to the rally and say repeal and replace. But they go home and say, don't you touch my health care.
Touch my health.
And that's the problem. The party, the GOP is so out of touch, they don't know what to do.
Well, brother, it's gotten so bad now that apparently Rand Paul can't even mow his grass without his next door neighbor coming and punching him in the ribs. I mean, the thing now has gotten out of hand. As you said, the civility, the discourse has diminished. And so what you're finding now is that people are looking up and saying, I can make a difference. I mean, all those offices that you just ran down, Roland, in terms of people who have to vote for, people are realizing that I don't have to wage war on Trump at the air level. I need to be on the ground, intervening in my community.
Let's talk about that ground game, how critical that is. And again, you're talking about mobilizing and organizing. We saw that happen. Sorry, folks, I am paying attention. But again, we'll look at different election results. Let's see here. In Atlantic City, Frank Gilliam, he won the mayoral race there, and so an African-American mayor there in Atlantic City. So again, let's talk about, again, ground game, ground game. At the end of the day, you saw it happen in Charlotte. She got outspent 10-1. But if you knock on more doors, if you go to more communities, if you mobilize people, you can beat money.
Absolutely. And you laid it out with Justin. We know he's going to run for governor in 4 years. Vi, the sister who is now the mayor, the first time as a black woman mayor in Charlotte since there's been a Charlotte, was on the city council. These stepping stone positions are very important. In many of the elections that you laid out, we look at Minneapolis, for example, where you've got a transgender man, black man, who has about 40% of the vote. He may displace the city council chair. Does he run for mayor in 2 years?
Let me say this, Michael, why it matters. And so I just told you about the sister in the Atlantic County government race. Ashley Bennett. So when I hear this crap from people who say, my vote doesn't matter, let me explain to you, this is a perfect example. This is a 32-year-old sister who runs against a Republican, John Carmen, who he was the guy who used the Confederate symbol on his Facebook page and then blasted the Women's March on his Facebook page. This is the result of that election. She won 4,140 to 3,981.
I guess, that's one of the things.
159 votes.
Tight. Tight. Which also shows that if you're a candidate of color, yes, of course you have to make sure you're getting your base, whoever that base is, whether it's, if you're a Latino person, make sure the Latinos vote for you. If you're black, make sure black folks vote for you. You also have to cross over.
No question.
You have to be able to attract other kind of voters to who you are. Yeah. That's what Donald Trump's not able to do. That's what other politicians haven't been able to do, and that's what these politicians hopefully are doing. Clearly, Justin Fairfax was able to do it.
Absolutely.
Clearly, the Lieutenant Governor-elect in New Jersey was able to do that. And that's the key, is you have to be a melting pot candidate. You have to be able to bring other people besides the people that just look like
Let's talk about money. I want to deal with money for a second here as well. When we talk about running for office, fundraising matters. We saw this, of course, and again, I know everybody keeps talking about, when Senator Bernie Sanders ran, his average donation was $27. But again, I need to take this back to 84 and 88. Small money passed around church plates, given out, fueled Reverend Jackson's campaign. Small donations also fuel the races of those first wave of African Americans who were elected in the 70s and the 80s as well. That has not changed. Folks who are watching this right now must understand that if you don't want to run, that's fine. But do understand, you cannot pray somebody's way to office. You have got to fund something. You got to pay for signs and phone banks, and you got to pay for grassroots people. You got to pay for pamphlets. You got to pay for digital ads. You got to do all of that. I mean, I believe in prayer, but remember, when Peter was drowning, when he walked on water, Jesus stuck his hand out, did not stick his hand in.
No, sir.
Peter had to do some work, too.
Had to do some work. In fact, Justin Fairfax maybe doesn't get elected if not for the muscle of Planned Parenthood out there organizing. And so you mentioned Emily's List earlier. I mean, you got to have money. And so that's why these organizations, these small bore organizations, have to form coalitions. I mean, Mike, what you're talking about, again, look at Atlanta. Look at Keisha Lance Bottoms. Maybe she reaches out to the people who finished 3rd and 4th, both white, to build coalition. But it's more important to get that ground game going, and that's going to cost dollars. There are not enough black people in St. Paul to elect that young brother Melvin Carter III, whose grandfather was a Pullman porter. The Rondo community, I've been there, is very small. So what did he need? He needed ground game. And for ground game, you need dollars.
Let me also give a shout out here to, of course, you've seen her on the show, Quentin James and Stephanie Brown James. They created the Collective Political Action Committee. And
Yes.
so let me try to pull this up real quick, folks. The Collective Political Action Committee, again, same thing, black folks who got tired of folks just talking the talk. And so, Shelley, go to my iPad. They created a political action committee to fund and support black candidates. If you go to their website, you'll see you have Sheila Oliver, who is one of their candidates, and they have the donate button. She wins so you got to see they got the cursor here. She wins in New Jersey today. Justin Fairfax, he wins there. Stacey Abrams, she's running for governor of Georgia. Andrew Gilliam running for governor of Florida. Ben Jealous running for governor of Maryland. You also have Ma Rockamore, Cummings, who's running for governor of Maryland. You also have Seti Warren running in Massachusetts. His brother here, Aaron Ford, running for Attorney General of Nevada. Rob Richardson for Treasurer of Ohio. And more candidates. Pennsylvania, Supreme Court positions, state secretaries, also various assemblies. And so these are folks who they are supporting. You also have these House races down here. Pam Keith, who ran for the United States Senate, is running there as well. This is also where you have to be able to help those folks who are in need. So I want to give a shout out to the Collective Political Action Committee for what they are doing.
That's right.
Mike Brown, Greg Cardwell, appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Roland, thank you, brother.
Thanks a lot. All right, folks.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh, my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.